Hello and welcome to Moving Communities Insight. Today we're going to talk a case study effectively with my colleague here, Sagar. Sagar, could you just introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you do and where you do it, please.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Sagar Barua. I'm the relationship manager for leisure for Westminster City Council. We look after obviously the physical activity, leisure and sport facilities within Westminster with our contractor, Everyone Active.
Excellent. Relationship manager, that's a new one from my point of view. What does that mean? Is that bigger than the contract? Because you guys do an awful lot of stuff around physical activity and health in the borough, don't you?
We do. And I think these changes came about a few years ago. I guess what used to be called the contracts manager or leisure contracts manager, which was my previous job title. I think it talks towards what we want to do, or what we certainly wanted to do with a contractor. It's more than just a council officer contractor relationship. It is building that relationship. It is working towards the same goals. So those job titles came in a few years ago, and to be honest, I think it's worked actually.
Brilliant. I really like the title because it just gives you so much more scope to look at what you can do and how you do things, rather than that old sort of, as you said, contract monitoring officer or client officer.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got different roles as well. So you've got relationship manager for physical activity, so the kind of areas around disability, BAME, actual on the ground kind of stuff. And then you've got the relationship manager for sport as well, who works with clubs predominantly, and sort of London youth games and things like that.
Excellent. So you're effectively the glue that keeps physical activity in the forefront of all of those stakeholders that you work with, but as well the community that you deliver to. So that's an interesting role. So we're here to talk about moving communities and the data and the insight that's provided. And I've had a look at some of your numbers, and there's some really interesting bits in there, which I'm going to talk about today. But just give us an overview. What have you found looking at the data and the insight on your moving communities dashboard?
It's been fascinating, really, for us. We all tend to sort of have a view of what impact things have had in the last 18 months or 2 years, but it's really fascinating to actually drill down and look at those numbers and some really amazing little nuggets that have popped up. So yeah, it's been very, very useful for us.
Good, excellent. And the one thing that struck me, because I don't live in London, I know Westminster because I've been to a couple of places in Westminster and obviously the Houses of Parliament, etc. But what amazed me was how much your community lives in those lower deprivation groups. And actually, how many of those have come back to taking part in activity with you? How do you explain that?
Yeah, I think it's one of those misnomers almost of Westminster. Everyone, when you say Westminster, thinks of this rich borough with the House of Parliament, Buckingham Palace, all of the kind of embassies and high fashion areas and streets. But actually, when you drill down on it, we have some of the lowest deprived areas within the country. Actually, I think a couple are in the top sort of 4 or 5. So it's about managing and enabling access to all of our community, and actually to give the most help to those that need it the most. So yeah, like you say, some of the fascinating information that's come out of moving communities was just how many from those sort of lower deprived areas or have come to our centres when compared to the national average as well.
Absolutely. So you must be doing something within the programming, within the communication that gets people to value what you do. Can you put your finger on anything in particular?
I think it's a wholesale thing. I don't think it's one thing or another. I think pricing is so important as well. We have a fees and charges structure, which is across Westminster and based on proportionate universalism. So we try to ensure that, firstly, our residents get the best deal, So nobody else will be getting a better deal than our residents. And we ensure that that's the same thing wherever possible with booking, with access to the leisure centres, because often, even if it's not on price, it may be on accessibility. So, you know, I'm a member of this organisation or this membership structure, so I get a week booking, but you get 2 days. So it's trying to ensure that actually we're on a level playing field, and actually residents and those that need it the most are able really to access their centres. At the end of the day, these are their facilities as much as anyone else's.
It's really interesting. So you're really saying it starts at a policy level, and then it's implemented by whoever you've got the relationship with, whoever's delivering the services for you, in a way that makes it as equitable from an access point of view as you can.
Absolutely, yeah. And so fees and charges was one example, accessibility, timing and booking was another, but also knowing our communities and trying to put on programs, not just in leisure centre. You know, we've got one program here, it's about where they want to do it, and trying to really get down on that kind of detail.
Okay, and that's interesting, because you've started to talk now about locations. And one of the other things I noticed within your recovery piece was one site wasn't necessarily recovering as well as all of the others, Marshall Street. So what's the difference between Marshall Street and some of the other sites that you operate?
Yeah, quite fascinating again, but probably a little bit less surprising for us was the fact that Marshall Street's recovery was slower than the others. Marshall Street is a phenomenal leisure centre. It's a Grade 2 listed, beautiful facility, but it's smack bang in the middle of the West End, and the West End has been hit. I read something the other day that actually London and the West End has been hit harder than any other part in the UK, and that kind of makes sense, you know, when you think about it. The issue is there is a low proportion of residents in the vicinity of Marshall Street, whereas the other centres, what we've seen is actually residents using the opportunities of quieter times and people working from home being able to go to your local facility. Marshall Street doesn't enable that because there is still a commute for most people to get to that facility. And, you know, as we've seen with other industries, whether it's retail or entertainment or catering and food outlets, the number of people visiting the West End dropped massively. And I think we're starting to see the kind of green shoots coming through now, which is fantastic. But it definitely does explain some of the issues that we've seen at Marshall Street.
Okay, so I think what's really interesting there, Sagar, is you've looked at the recovery as a general picture using the information that moving communities give you, the data. You've then created some insights. So you've actually started looking at individual sites and things like that, and you've noticed that Marshall Street isn't recovering quite as quickly, and you know the reason, so you've created that insight. How is knowing this data and using this insight, how has it affected the planning process that you're going through at the moment for recovery?
It means that we don't just take a overall view of everything and come up with, you know, one kind of one thing that resolves everything. I think it is important to look individually at centres, at communities, and you know, look at the factors of why people are or aren't going back to centres. For Marshall Street itself, you know, we're looking at the recovery generally of the West End. Westminster Council has put a significant amount of effort and time into trying to regenerate the West End, and whether that's, you know, Oxford Street regeneration programs, some big programs that are going on, that's with the focus of getting people back into the West End. So we are looking across the board, but I think significantly it's those kind of nuggets of information that focus your attention towards what can we do for this particular centre, or even these times at this particular centre.
Okay, I guess what you're then doing is you're looking, because we have the ability to look at the demographics, the age profiles, the gender profiles and things like that, and then it will be the influence that you have from a physical activity point of view to make sure the programs reflect those people.
Absolutely, and the other thing that we have, which we've set up for a few years now is something called Active Westminster Networks. So each we split the borough into 3 geographic areas so that you can focus very much on the local communities and the local facilities within those communities. So Active Westminster North, Central and South, they very much deal with the clubs, centres, schools within their geographical area, and it definitely helps to promote not just activities and programs, but it's a supply and demand issue as well. It's clubs saying I haven't got access at these times, and we look at the other facilities in that geographical area, and it's communication, it's getting those communities together, and a lot of the time we're quite hands off, and it's clubs talking directly as part of that network to try and engage and really drill down and figure out what can we do for each other, because at the end of the day, mostly our goals and aims are the same. We want people to go to our centres, and we want people to be physically active.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Sagar. That has been so interesting. Thank you so much for your time, and more importantly, thank you for using the data and insight that the Moving Communities platform generates, because it took a lot of work to get us to this position, and to hear the types of things that you've found out, you've realised, and now you're doing something about. It's really pleasing. Thank you so much for your time, Sagar.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to you guys, because as you say, sometimes it is a lot of effort to get into the detail, and some of the information coming back can be surprising at times, but it is definitely worth it. And yeah, we're very grateful. So thanks a lot.
No, it's our pleasure. Thank you very much for your time, Sagar. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers.